Hi, everybody. This is Matthew Pose with Pose Acoustics, and I'm doing some Max SPL testing in my room, and it was done as an experiment to show you how room gain works. Actually, in the case of waveforming, there is no room gain, so how that works and what we can expect for output in a room at really low frequencies with subwoofers using actual test data. So I'm going to go ahead and add my screen. Should have done this ahead of time. All right. So at 25 hertz, this speaker that was tested by James Larson, the RTJ18, I have 4 of these in the front, and I have 2 dual 12s in the back used as catchers from RBH. So the 4 in the front, those are the primary drivers of output. The rears aren't really doing anything. 110.5 dB for one subwoofer at 25 hertz, right? So we would expect with 4 of those to be at to be 122.5, but 12 dB more than that. So I'm going to type this in so I don't forget it later. 110.5 plus 12 goes 122.5. At 20 hertz, we're at 106.1 plus 12 is 118. And then we get to 16 hertz, that's 100.3 plus 12, which is 112. Let's look at what we really got. Remember, in theory, there shouldn't be any room gain here. And my microphone is actually a bit more conservative than James's. So my results tend to be lower than his. You can get a little bit of room gain. So in the first test that I did, we didn't actually fail. I had to turn it up. I saved it. I don't know why I saved it. Maybe just to show you guys. I don't know. So ignore this number here and ignore this number here. Look at this number here. So what we want to look at is the CEA 2010 peak, which is 124.6. But that wasn't actually the highest result. We actually hit 126.7. So that's 4 dB higher than what we expected to hit. We expected to hit 122.5 and we hit 126.7. That is a substantial difference. And while that could be microphone differences at such low frequencies, I believe that that is probably more likely a small amount of room gain that we're still getting with this setup. At 20 hertz, we hit 123.3. So what we were expecting to get was 118. So there's about a 5 decibel difference there. I also think that that is room gain. And you're seeing that the amount of gain is going up as we go down, which follows what we would expect to see. We're not seeing the theoretical amount of room gain we would expect. And that's because planar arrays, planar wavefronts don't actually get much, if any, room gain. All right, at 16 hertz, we hit 119.9 dB. And I did the test twice because I wanted to be sure it was right because of some of the stuff here. And you can see the third harmonic is the failing harmonic in every one of these cases. So theoretically, we expected to be at 112. We're 7 dB higher than that at 119.9. Part of why I wanted to do this is somebody had made a comment about how sealed subwoofers, small sealed subwoofers, and 18s are not that small, but compared to some of the giant stuff out there, small sealed subwoofers in theater rooms cannot possibly reproduce high amounts of infrasonic bass. And as you can see, we produced what I think is quite a lot. It's about 120 decibels at 16 hertz. It's quite a lot of output of infrasonic bass. And the failing on it really was just third harmonic. One of the interesting things was that pushing it beyond this blew the 240 volt 20 amp breaker. It blew it, popped it. During content, I've never once popped a breaker. And I actually went through the whole test more than once before I did pop a breaker. I think it was just me fooling around. This is a very difficult, the actual burst itself isn't bad, but to just sit there and have the burst going nonstop at 16 hertz, which is what I was doing. And then I kept turning it up. And then I exceeded the limits because I wanted to see how loud I could go. And that is when I popped a breaker. So it shows you that this whole system actually can draw more power. And actually the distortion really wasn't that high when it did draw enough power. I suspect Jeff's subwoofer can handle even more power, but you would be doing so at pretty gross levels of distortion. And I don't know why you'd want to do that. But anyway, this is not meant to be a long and drawn out video. This was just meant to show you what happens when you put together these arrays. If we were to stick these 18s in the corners, we probably would get a little bit more room gain, but I would say, I don't know that you would get the full 12 dB per octave. So if you think about 12 dB per octave, in my particular room, around 30 hertz or so is the point at which we'd be looking at my first mode, and the 12 dB per octave rise happens below the first mode in the room. So from the 0th mode to the first mode, we see this 12 dB per octave rise happening, or it's the other way around really. And so at around 15 hertz, somewhere around here, we would expect to be 12 dB higher than we are here. And in my own system, we're showing that we're about 7 dB higher than theory, which is kind of in line with a little more than half of the expected room gain. I don't know that if we stuck them in the corner that it would be that much better. It might be like somewhere between 8 and 10 dB, probably not 12, because the 12 dB is also assuming that you basically have a concrete bunker with no leaks. Well, I have air vents, I have outlets in the room. I mean, there's a door, the door has gaskets and seals, it's really thick and heavy. The walls are really thick and heavy, but they're not concrete stiff. And so there are losses. And so we would expect to be less than 10. I'm sorry, less than 12. And so probably more like 10 and maybe a little bit less than that. So I think that when you consider all the other advantages that the array gives, which is that we have a lot less modal issues than we would have otherwise, there's also no loss over distance. So one of the issues with subwoofers that are not producing planar, but actually are doing spherical arrays, is that you have a 6 dB loss for every doubling of distance, and that would still be true in a room. It's just that as you get near the boundaries, it goes back up again. So in the seated position, you might not be any louder than you are here, because this has, that would be kind of right in the middle between the subwoofers. And we don't have any loss with a planar array. It's the exact same output at the sub as it would be at the seated position in these kind of arrays. So you lose some gain in one area, you gain it in another area. And as you can see, we follow theory pretty well, and actually theory plus some room gain. It does really, really well on max SPL output. I think those are good numbers. I'd be curious to know how much I'd have to do in terms of bigger subwoofers or more subwoofers to do better than that yet. Some of you may be asking why I didn't go below, 16 hertz. That's because the built-in protocol for doing it here doesn't go below 16. I can set the number below it, but I won't get a pass-fail number. And so I'd have to manually figure out, without the little distortion thing here, what that's supposed to be. And I just decided for this testing purposes and to show you guys what's going on, there was no point. But if we go back to the numbers, it's going to be, you know, probably here at 10 hertz, take the 90.9 plus 12 dB, which is around 102, 103 dB, and then probably plus another 7 to 10 dB. So you're looking at probably, it might be as much as 120 actually decibels at 10 hertz. That's not completely irrational to think that that could happen. There's issues with testing it though. As I said, the test protocol doesn't include an easy way to do that. And I'd be at much higher likelihood at that point of popping a breaker if I tried to do that. That's really low. For those of you who are wondering, it was not the most pleasant experience to be in the room during this test, and things that don't normally rattle were rattling. But it was a test. It was not actually meant to be real life. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video interesting. Thanks for watching. We'll do more of this.